Hey there, friends and enemies, JoPa here again, and today I want to ask the question of whether Marathon will actually doom Bungie, as there are a ton of rumors spreading about not only the game, but the studio itself, and comments from the COO of Sony about the restructuring. So I'm going to dive into all that, kind of wrap up all the information we know, and give my thoughts on where everything stands right now. So if you previously missed it, Bungie laid off a bunch of developers, and a ton more were actually moved under the Sony umbrella. Whether it is working on a game for a brand new studio they're opening or working for Sony itself, these developers have really reduced the total workforce over at Bungie down to a bit over 800. And this makes a massive difference because it really felt like Bungie had gotten too big for itself and were trying to do too much. Rumors came out that not only was Bungie working on Destiny 2 and Marathon, but they also had this other project titled Gummy Bears in the works. This is just a placeholder title, and that one is actually being spun off into its own studio. On top of that, they had a potential third-person Destiny universe game, which was not going to be a direct sequel, that they were also planning on, that they already had people in charge of directing that game. And then finally, they had other projects in the works as well. And this comes amid the general consensus that Destiny was in a poor place while they were planning all this stuff. I know the studio was planning for its long-term future, but it really felt like they had spread themselves far too thin and weren't concentrating on the moneymaker, the thing that was going to generate enough revenue. Now, while that was true of the Lightfall expansion, Into the Light and the Final Shape were bangers as far as actual content, but we've still seen a dramatic fall off of the player base for expansions and rumors that the upcoming Destiny content will not include major yearly expansions, which is a major bummer for a lot of people, and it really feels like they're ramping down the production of Destiny 2 content, or at least reformatting it in a way that make the game continue to chug on, but it may not have all the excitement that it once did. And so while you're going to probably continue to hemorrhage players for Destiny, and it won't feel like you're getting the most bang for your buck, they've also mentioned over at Bungie that they feel like the player base is too old. And again, understandable. It's a high barrier for entry into the Destiny universe. There's a difficult chance. There's no real way to onboard new players consistently, especially with so many other games competing for that attention. And so it does make a lot of sense. And that leads me into Marathon. I do feel like with Marathon, they want the game to appeal to a different audience rather than just former Destiny players, while also making the game's gunplay feel as good as Destiny. That's absolutely the key, because the one thing that separates Bungie from other studios is the feel of the gunplay. It feels refined, it feels crisp, and there's a lot of aspects about it that you just can't replicate in other games. It's why PvP players will constantly complain about Destiny 2, but continue to play the game because they just can't find that same feeling in other games. And I hope Marathon can replicate that. But Jason Schreier has reported that with Marathon, they have been struggling quite a bit. They changed game directors at some point last year, and they also are not really finding a cohesive message with the game. And this was as of a few months ago, although he just recently talked about this in a podcast and essentially mentioned that the game is not looking great as of when he heard about it. Now, recently, a week or two ago, we saw that major content creators were actually flown out to Seattle in order to playtest Marathon. We didn't get any reactions to that, no thoughts on how the game is performing. I think all those content creators likely signed NDAs, but I'd be very curious to see the thoughts and when that embargo lifts on whether the game has the potential to be successful, because I do feel like a lot of what Bungie does going forward will hinge upon the success of Marathon. And I've said for a long time that I think Destiny 2 needs a break in content for not only the players, because there is a level of burnout, especially now that we've concluded that 10-year saga, but also a break for the developers to where they can take a step back and start innovating instead of trying to churn out content constantly, which is the struggle. I think when you have a game like Destiny that is that age, it needs a complete revamp in order to draw players back. Now that we've crossed that 10-year bridge, it's time to start a new cycle. Whether that's a Destiny 3 looks unlikely, but I do feel like with Destiny 2, they need the money to keep coming in for that game through annual passes, season passes, expansions, whatever the case may be. But they also will keep churning out content through these developers who are not having the time to really innovate something new and fresh and exciting. And that's a real problem. I'm hopeful that with Marathon, it does feel completely different from other extraction shooters that we do get. However, it is one of the few sci-fi ones. We saw the cycle around for a little bit, but otherwise, it's not a hyper-realistic extraction shooter. So for that reason, I think there is potential there to separate itself and add some unique gameplay elements. One of the major problems is it's going to be hero-based instead of a customizable character, which I think will keep people from fully jumping on board. Some people prefer to have their own unique character that they can jump in the roles of instead of having a preset character that you essentially unlock skins for and everything. So I just think that might be a mistake, but it was the direction they seem to be going. Now, circling all this back, I do feel like there's a couple things to keep in mind. One is that if Marathon struggles and Destiny is not producing the revenue that they would like, that would be a catastrophe for Bungie, and we'd likely see even more layoffs. But I do think because of the $3.2 billion acquisition by Sony, they're somewhat insulated from a complete dissolution, but I do think they would be completely absorbed by Sony if that was the case, and they would have new leadership, which it looks like is on the way anyway. I would imagine Pete Parsons will not last long as the CEO of Bungie based on the reception and feedback he's been getting, but I'd imagine they're waiting for Marathon to drop and to see where it performs. And if it underperforms, then he probably doesn't hit his bonus structures and has to be forced out by Sony. So I'd be very curious to see how that works. But I do feel like at this point, the biggest issues that we're going to find are that Marathon and Destiny 2, one of them needs a boost in revenue. Whether that happens or not, those are the only two games that right now Bungie is focused on. The reports from the Sony COO, what he's stated is that Bungie is only focused on Destiny 2 and Marathon right now. Hopefully that refocus and the ability to not have too many plates spinning at one given time means that they will have all eyes on this and try to make these games the best possible games they can, because at the end of the day, that's what matters. If a game is good, it will be successful regardless of all the lead up and the frustrating conversations happening. All the people talking about being underwhelming won't matter if they are able to turn it around. And we've seen in the past that Bungie has been able to produce some of their best content when their backs are against the wall. You look at the final shape. But I think ultimately, this is where I'm a little bit concerned, because if both of those games start to struggle, if Destiny loses players and we get a Marathon that just underperforms, it could be the end of Bungie as we know it, and that is a real shame considering the legacy of the studio. It's developed Halo, it's developed Destiny, some of the best franchises in video game history, and it'd be a sad way for it to go out with all these struggles. Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Do you think this is going to be the end all of Bungie? Do you think Marathon is going to doom it once and for all? Or do you think this could be the start of a potential turnaround where we see the rise from the ashes for Bungie in the long run? I think there's a potential for either case to be true. It all hinges on Marathon, because I think Destiny at the end of the day is what it is. And I wouldn't be surprised if it finds a steady player base, but it's never going to reach the peaks that it's gotten to in the past. So anyway, my name is JoPa. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Helps me out tremendously. My dog is very antsy in the background, so apologies for that. Anyway, have a good one. Like, comment, subscribe if you want to see more Marathon and Destiny 2 content. Have a good one. I'll catch you all later.